Okay, we're talking about the Montessori and technology. In this modern digital world, we see many children are being exposed to gadgets from early age. Am I right? And how does the Montessori approach technology and the use of the gadget itself?
Well, I think it's really interesting. There are a lot of children who are being exposed to it, but we apply a Montessori lens. And just like we said that there's different characteristics for children at different age, they have different needs. So the 0 to 6 child is a sensorial learner, so they learn best. And that's why with the things in their hands, with concrete objects, not a screen, which is very abstract. And they're only using their finger like this. It's not great for their fine motor development or things like their cognitive development. So the screen is not necessary, we say in Montessori, for children under 6 years old. The only time that we would use it is things like a video call with one of your family, for example. And then I would even try and make it as interactive as possible by having one person, like the person you're calling, to have a book that you know that the child likes, and then they can read the book with the child and involve them in the screen. The other thing you could think of is maybe doing audiobooks, because when you books and audiobooks, it's only what you can imagine. So you're not putting ideas into their head that they're not ready for. So audiobooks can be a nice alternative for a car trip or something like that, rather than a screen. And then for 6 to 12-year-olds, they are starting to want to, like Junnifa mentioned, the mental independence, and they've got this rational mind, and they can start to use technology as a tool. So Junnifa always says we use it to create rather than consume. And I think that's such a good guideline, because there's so many ways of passive entertainment. But actually, technology can be an amazing tool. So if they were interested in coding, that they would learn to code a program. Or if they wanted to make stop motion animation films, they could do that. That's a very, you have to think of a storyline, and you make the Play-Doh and you put all the characters in a line, and then you take a photo of each. So stop motion animation would be an amazing thing for them to get into. But can you see that these are all active ways of using technologies rather than passively consuming? And then we always, like I mentioned, make agreements with the children from 6 to 12 years old. So we'd be very clear how long, and we're talking about not very long at all, and what they were using it for. So we are making sure that it's not social media. They're not ready for social media in the 6 to 12 years old, because they're so busy learning the social relationships in person. For them, that's that concrete thing that they need to master in the 6 to 12 years. And then once they move on to 12 to 18, then they're young adults, and they still need a lot of guidance to use this tool in a way that we do as adults. Even adults have trouble, finding it not addictive. So we can really put off introducing social media until as late as possible. We can show them how we use technology, and if they are using the computer for their schoolwork, for example, how they don't get distracted by messages or by the emails that come in and things like that. So that's a rough guide of how we introduce technology. First, we have hardly any technology under 6 years old. We really don't recommend it. 6 to 12 as a tool, and then 12 to 18 as a young adult, and with a lot of guidance and a lot about safety, how we use the tool safely in those years.
That's very interesting. I need to read it until finish about the technology itself, because it's kind of difficult to apply it. Yeah. Okay. What about you, Junnifa? Do you have other perspective?
Yeah. No, I agree with Simone. That's also what I implement in my house, and I just wanted to respond to you saying that it's hard to implement.
Yes.
I agree that it's hard, but I think that once you start and you start to enjoy the benefits, because I find that younger children, you find that they engage more. It's easy to just kind of say, here's an iPad, and they go somewhere and they're not disturbing you. But then there are lots of missed opportunities for communication. There are lots of missed opportunities for them to interact with you. And I think the only other thing that I would add apart from that is that we also, apart from trying to watch how our children engage with technology, it's important to remember that the way that we engage with technology is a reference for our children because we're modeling for them and they're absorbing our own use or our own interaction with technology. So we can say, oh, don't use it, but then we're always scrolling or we're always on our computers or always on our phone. And we always share that we can model to them how to use technology. We can set limits for ourselves around what time are we on our phones or on our computers maybe. So like dinner time is a no technology, can be a no technology time, both for the adults and the children. And we can have time where we have one-on-one time with our children where we're not on our phones. And then in those times where we're using our phones when we're with our children, we can say to them, this is what we're doing right now, so that they know, oh, I need to send an email, and we finish and we close it and we put it away. So basically, it's in thinking about technology with children, we should not only be thinking about their use, we should also think about our use.
So there's another questions from Pia Mariana. How far Montessori can help with issues such as speech delay?
I think that some of the ways that Montessori can help with speech delay is that usually Montessori environments, Montessori home and environment are very rich language environments. Often we're speaking to the child before they are born. When they're born, we're talking to them and telling them what we're doing with them. We're enunciating, we're using rich language and rich vocabulary. So I think that, and usually for language to be formed, the child has to take in a lot of language. And so Montessori helps with that because it's a very rich, usually a Montessori environment is a very rich language-dense environment. I think the other thing is that the way that language is introduced, at least in a Montessori school, it's a phonetic way, and it's the sounds are introduced, the child masters that, and there's a systematic way that the child is introduced to language. And this usually helps children who struggle with language. And often it's not, they're not only hearing. So for example, when we introduce sound, they're hearing, they're touching, they might be objects that they are connecting with the sounds. So all of those things, it gives the child different things to connect with. And then everything that we do with the child involves language, whether we're introducing how to bake or how to sew or how to write, everything involves language. So I think that all of those things make Montessori very helpful for a child who has language delays. And then because we're constantly observing the child, I think that we will notice early if there's a delay, and then we can find the help that we need and support the child. So all of these things in a Montessori environment help a child that has a language delay.
Okay. Simone, you want to add it?
Well, no, actually, I was going to just add the observation piece, and then Junnifa mentioned that as well. Because you're looking at the big picture, why is the child not observing? Is it something to do with their hearing? Because if they have had a lot of ear infections, for example, that might be that they didn't actually absorb the language, or do they need to have, it might not even be ear infections, but it might be that they need to have that with their ears, with the adenoids and things like that. So it can be a very holistic approach then when you're looking at when do they not hear so well. Sometimes they're also hyper-focused children, so they're also not listening as much. But I love that how the Montessori approach is just so rich, and we also really time to listen to children, get down to their level to give lessons. We really stop and take time and for communication, which I think is such a different approach to this busy life. It's really an antidote to busy parenting, where we stop and we listen. We really take time to communicate, even from the time they're babies, as Junnifa mentioned. So that all these things will help with this speech delay. But we should add is that Montessori is not a fix-all. So your child may need extra support as well as the Montessori approach in your home. You may still need a speech pathologist, because it's basically observing, can I handle this, or do they need extra assistance and support as well?
Okay, that's very good point. There is a question from Sally, and it's quite interesting. I'm Sally from Bandung. I'm so interested in audiobook as the Montessori method that just discussed before. As a fiction author, is there any way that could make a children's stories or audiobook that have correlation with the Montessori parenting? Thank you.
Junnifa, would you like to take this one?
Sure. I think definitely. I guess you could always apply the Montessori principles to the books that you make. So if you're writing books for children from 0 to 6, as much as possible, making them based on reality. If you're making for the youngest children, so like the toddlers, using illustrations that are beautiful, that are recognizable, and then if you write for older children, 6 and above, you can books that introduce them to the universe, so books that allow them to learn about planets, the topics that interest or sparks their imagination and their desire to learn more, books that give them keys that make them want to learn more. So I think definitely you can apply the Montessori method in books that you write for children. You can write books about different topics. Montessori children are interested in all kinds of things. So I think those are the two things that I'll think about. For younger children, as realistic as possible, beautiful illustrations. For older children, books that spark their imagination or encourage them to use their imagination, as well as books that encourage them to want to learn more, that give them keys or like introduce ideas that they can seek out more information. And then of course, beautiful language, beautiful illustrations. The same way we wrote our book in a Montessori way, I hope. We tried to use beautiful illustrations, keeping the book, the way the book looks, clean, laid out in such a way that it's attractive. I think those are the things that I would say a person who wants to write books for children would consider. I hope I understood the question well.
Okay, Nani, you can turn on your camera.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. And hi, Simon and Junnifa. It's very nice to see you guys, even it's virtual. And I'm a big fan of you both and your 2 books. It was just amazing. And my question is, if it's impossible for us to take our kids to like Montessori school, which, as we know, like a non-Montessori school has like some different approach in like writing or reading, like and some kind of stuff. How do you overcome it so that our child will not get like confused, or should we just following the approach that used in the school, which is non-Montessori school, or do you have any suggestions? Thank you.
Well, what we like to say is that academic things like reading and writing and maths and those kind of things, we leave how the school are doing it, and we don't try and replicate a Montessori environment at home, like having all of the language materials, and really more living in a Montessori way once the child goes to school, unless you're homeschooling them and that kind of thing, because like you say, it actually can be confusing. And then I would only like look to the Montessori materials. For example, I had a friend whose child went to a traditional, like a non-Montessori school, and they were having trouble remembering their times table, the multiplication. And so then she found a Montessori material that the child would have at home to practice that kind of thing. So it might just be used as an additional support, but not ever to teach them a different way, because they are 2 very different ways. Like the Montessori approach has so many lessons that start from a 3-year-old learning, this is 1, this is 10, this is 100, this is 1,000. They learn to multiply, take things away in very concrete ways. But what you could do is just, if your child's having trouble grasping a concept, you can think, how can I show this to them in a concrete way? And this might help support what they're learning at school.